this Valentine's night audit meeting. Glad you could all make it. So we've had a number of apologies for absence. So there's obviously Fiona has hurt her ankle and is incapacitated, so she can't make it. So we've got Nigel, who's going to field our queries and help us out. Councillor Burney is not well, I believe. He exhausted himself in the joint budget meeting, asking Nigel about 100 questions. So, consecutively. He took the whole meeting on single-handedly. So maybe he's recovering from that. And we're waiting for Councillor Hobson, who hopefully will burst in through the door any minute now.
Well, that's upgraded, because a minute ago it was bowling through the door. Now it's bursting in through the door.
That's true, you know. Are there any declarations of interest? So we got the minutes from the last meeting. Are there any questions or queries, or can we sign those off? Say aye. Agreed, thank you. There's no public participation today. And the first item, number 5 on the agenda, is an introduction from our external auditors. So over to Chris.
So just before Chris jumps in, let me give a very brief background, as Councillor Doris has just alluded to. We have a new external audit firm for 23-24, which is KPMG, of which Christopher Paisley is effectively our audit director. And he will be overseeing the audits for ourselves in 23-24, and he's already had lots of introductions to the finance team and myself. And in terms of KPMG, they're already undertaking the value for money audit for 23-24 as well. And I'd like to extend my gratitude to Christopher for entertaining us on Valentine's evening. Very much appreciate you coming. Obviously on presentation, that's better than nothing, Chris.
Can I ask, first of all, will Chris be giving his presentation with the backing of a string quartet playing sort of discreetly in the corner? But much more seriously, you say 23-24. Is it a 1-year contract, or is it? It's not an indefinite contract, is it?
No. As we reported to this committee, I think it was about August, September last year, in terms of the confirmation of KPMG. It's a multi-year contract. In terms of what will happen in the future, I think a lot will be decided over the next kind of 6 to 12 months, because there's a lot of changes that are happening with audit and external audit going forward, which I won't say much. It may not actually be included in Chris's presentation because it's very fresh. And there is going to be a committee paper coming to this group at the next audit committee in relation to the consultation that's being put out by DLUC and SIPFA and NAO and FRC in relation to a proposed audit backstop for 22-23 and prior year accounts. Chris may allude to it, he may not, because it literally got announced on Thursday last week and details came out Friday and Monday this week.
Thanks.
Okay. Over to Chris.
Okay, hello. Good evening, everybody. Nigel's rather stolen my thunder there regarding the backstop. That was going to be my big reveal. But no, it's great to meet you all. Thank you for inviting me, albeit remotely, and thanks also for enabling me to dial in to tonight's meeting, which I know is not normal protocol, but I do appreciate it, given I'm just giving a brief verbal update. I am intending to attend your audit committee meeting in March, and look forward to meeting with you then. And I'll talk a little bit at the end about next steps vis-a-vis audit plan documents and so on. Just to give you a little bit of background, as you know, my name is Chris Paisley. I'm a director in the public sector audit team in Manchester. I've specialised in audit and assurance in the public sector for my entire time with KPMG, which is some 14 years or so, specialising in education, NHS, and of course, local government. You may or may not be aware that the most recent contract round of local government framework contract round, which ended in or ends in with a 23-year end, was not one that KPMG participated in for reasons which I won't go into. But during that time, during the intervening period, I've been keeping my powder dry, as it were, by working with some Scottish authorities. So I've not lost my local government knowledge or focus during that time. 2024 onwards, we're back in the sector, and just to answer that point, it is intended to be a further 5-year appointment cycle from 2024 through to 2028 year end. I mainly wanted to sort of introduce myself at this point, reassure you, I suppose, that the very positive working relationship that I've been hearing about that the authority has had with Grant Thornton over the last 5 years is something that we are and I am committed to continuing. We've been working very hard, as Nigel alludes to get up to speed with your systems and processes, and my team's very much enjoying working with the finance team. So I have to, at this point, remark on Nigel's team, particularly Fiona and Lexi, in terms of how fantastic they've been with helping us get up to speed. And it's safe to say we've started the audit relationship very positively. If I also touch on the consultation point that Nigel mentioned, you may or may not be aware of, I'm sure you are aware of, very significant delays to audit sign-off across the sector. It's not a problem that you've suffered too greatly from, and I know that the 23 accounts are just waiting for assurance on the pension fund, which is outside of Decorum and Grant Thornton's control. You may be aware that DLUC have issued this consultation last week, and the aim of that is really to implement a form of backstop arrangement. It is a drastic measure, but it's a measure to try and catch up with audits, because some authorities have got 3 or more years of outstanding unaudited accounts for various different reasons. The idea behind it is that by the end of this September, March 23 year end accounts will need to either be signed off with an unqualified audit opinion, or they will need to have a disclaimer, what we call a disclaimer of opinion, which covers or states in the proper form that the various items on which the auditors have not been able to get assurance. And that could be 1 or 2 balances, right up to, we haven't audited this set of accounts, we haven't even turned the pages on them, and everything in between. For a number of authorities, that is going to be the case, which presents a headache for the incoming auditors for the 24 year end, vis-a-vis the opening balances and the prior year comparative figures within those accounts. Fortunately, it's hopefully not an issue for Decorum, and one that we'll have to navigate on this audit. Hopefully the 23 sign-off will be forthcoming within the coming weeks and months, and certainly way before the September deadline that's being proposed. Just a word on that consultation. It is by no means a fait accompli, and it is a consultation process it is a short consultation process of 4 weeks, which reflects the sort of near unanimous support for its proposals on the part of DLUC, the FRC and the firms, and also PSA and all those that have kind of contributed to it getting to where it is today. There is a 4-week consultation process, following which obviously any amendments that would need to take place. There is then a parliamentary approval process, but it's kind of a secondary legislation, but it would still need to receive assent of approval via a parliamentary process. Now, clearly, the big the thing that would really put a spanner in the works, I suppose, is if an election was to be called in May, because we anticipate that that parliamentary approval would probably take place in May or June based on the current timetable. But we hope very much that doesn't happen and that goes through, and we have a sort of light at the end of the tunnel for completing those audits. I wasn't going to say any too much more detail on that because I don't want to set hairs running as to that being an issue for decorum. It is very much going to be an issue for some of your neighbouring authorities, but less so for you. But that is the current state of play as things stand. The idea behind it is that you would have a September deadline for the 23 accounts. You'd then have let me get this right now. You'd have a deadline that comes forward slightly with respect to the relevant year end over time, up to the point where I think by 2027 or 2028 you come back to something like a normal timetable. So I think the deadline, the mooted deadline for 23 year ends, as I say, would be September 24. The mooted deadline for March 24 accounts would be May 25, and I forget beyond that, but you get the point. It's kind of a catching up process and building back that assurance picture. There's a lot of unknowns still, and there's lots of things that still to be ironed out as set out in the consultation. And the FRC have published an interesting and useful companion paper, I guess, to go alongside the DLUC consultation, which sets out from more of a technical accounts point of view FRC's perspective on it. But there are things to still go on that. I think that's probably all I can say, really, or all I can say, and I'm able to. But in terms of, from our perspective, we hope that that's all kind of a moot point. We are progressing really well with our audit planning, as Nigel said. We've commenced our value for money work, which ideally takes place during the year in question. So we're really keen to conclude that value for money work by the end of March, and the team is supporting us with that. My intention is, I forget the date, I think it's 20th of March, your next audit committee around then. My intention is to bring to you an indicative, a draft audit plan. That may move as things progress, but to bring you a physical document that we can talk to at the March meeting, which kind of sets out our current thinking around audit risks, materiality, all the things you would expect to see in an audit plan, and you will have had. This committee will have received in previous years from Grant Thornton. I think that was probably all I was going to say. I'd just round off by saying again a big thanks to Nigel's team for helping us and really be entering into a really positive relationship with us and helping us progress. And long may that continue. Happy to take any questions.
Nigel.
So just one question, Chris. As you have alluded to almost the whole consultation, which is not a bad thing given it's a short period. I think I know the answer to this, but for the benefit of the committee, what's the KPMG view on this proposal and the consultation?
The KPMG view would be it is a compromise, but it's an absolutely necessary one, and one that we very much support. Because we need to get back to some semblance of order in the market. It will provide us, as I alluded to, it will provide us with some challenges vis-a-vis opening balances and so on for those audits that have been disclaimed for the 23 year end. But where there's a will, there's a way, and it's important that it requires a drastic, as I said in my opening remarks, it requires a drastic solution, and hopefully that's what this provides.
And just for the committee, just to add a little bit more detail into what Chris was talking about earlier, at the moment there are some 900 outstanding audits across the country in terms of local authorities. So this backstop will wipe out that backlog in entirety. And to be perfectly honest, the external audit sector, even with the new players in the market like KPMG and a couple of other ones, are never going to catch up on those 900 old audits whilst doing the current in-year audits. So although I think the word drastic, I think Chris may have used earlier, so I'll steal that. Maybe it's a drastic approach. It is very much pragmatic and appears to be carrying favour across the sector. I think the one thing that the wider sector wants are some more permanent long-term changes in some of the highly complex technical aspects of external accounting, which have helped to create this problem. And two of the ones that the consultation raises is around simplification of the valuation of operational assets, which, believe it or not, we spend weeks arguing with valuers, external auditors about the value of an asset that we're not selling, We have no plan to sell. We'll just use it as an operational asset. And if at any point that changed, the value would not be as an operational asset, it'd probably be as a development value. So it's almost irrelevant. That's one aspect that was to change. And also the simplification of net pension assets and liabilities, which, you know, we won't go into detail here because we don't cover pensions directly as an authority, but when you value your pensions assets at the moment, it's on a set date. Now, when you've got £600 million in a pension fund, that asset value can change £30–40 million in a week, and can go and change another £30–40 million the week after. So some of the work we do at the moment and some of the challenges we have are just accountants playing with numbers, so to speak, and we'd like to see a lot of that simplified. And I think as part of the consultation, SIP for LASAC, which are effectively like the technical body, are going to take some of those away and hopefully come back with some positive proposals. Although, having been on a webinar with SIP for yesterday, they are just thinking about what their consultation will contain at the moment, so they appear to be slightly behind the rest of the sector in terms of this.
Councillor Lewis.
It's probably really a question for Chris, I think, but possibly Nigel. Given the relatively recent spate of 114s, do you anticipate that there will be a greater level of forensic examination by the external auditors on local authority accounts, a greater level than there has been perhaps in the past?
So let me give my view, and then
go on,
Chris
you talk first.
come to his.
Yeah.
I think part of the government's pragmatism on getting rid of these 900 existing ones is that they want to be able to put more pressure on proper scrutiny of future year accounts. And whilst they've got the backlog of 2, 3, 4 years, 3 Rivers, Watford, I think are 3 years, 4 years behind. Whilst they've got that backlog, it's very hard because they're trying to assess whether that authority was in difficulties 3 years ago. Don't really matter now because a lot has changed. COVID, economic uncertainty, mass investment has gone in different directions. So I think that's part of the government's wish in terms of that. The other thing in the consultation, they have remained very positive on the value for money audits. They remain a high priority. So although statements are likely to not get looked at or overseen, they're trying to stress to external auditors, it'd be interesting to get Chris's view, they want them to make sure they do the value for money audits because they see that as an indicator of an organisation's financial stability. So that is very much a high priority, even if the other parts of the account, the real technical aspects, are being, to a certain extent, kind of glossed over.
Yeah, just to echo those comments, I think that from a financial statements perspective, that there is limited scope really to call out and address some of those issues that might result in a 114. The big casualty, as Nigel says, the big casualty of these delays has been value for money work. That is really the mechanism. That is the early warning, because obviously from a going concern and accounts point of view, you know, even those that have issued a section 114 does not mean that there is an issue of going concern as such, because you have this continuity of service principle for entities that form part of the state. It's more a question of the value for money, and the value for money serves as a really effective early warning indicator. And you can, I suppose, draw a line between the absence of that assurance or lack of assurance and some of the if not surprises, then some of the high profile things that have taken place in the sector. So absolutely a big priority of that consultation is to try and return to that level of rigor around the value for money. And that is where, you know, you would pick up things around financial sustainability and hold organisations to account, frankly, and serve as that early warning indicator system.
Just one more comment, and this is just to prepare the committee more than anything else. I would say this is a section 151. You are going to be in an amazing situation as an audit committee. Chris might be having a slightly more nervous time, because at the moment we have our 22-23 value for money audit being undertaken by Grant Thornton at exactly the same time as our 23-24 value for money audit taken by KPMG. So over the next 2 audit committees, if not the next one, you will get 2 external audit opinions on the value for money for decorum, which Chris is smiling. I assume that they will probably say very similar messages because they
We hope so. If they don't.
They have worked very effectively in combining some of the meetings so that it hasn't taken up too much officer time. But it'll be interesting to see if there are any differences in their opinions or in their findings. But it will also provide us with a huge amount of, hopefully, reassurance in terms of where we are at.
Yes, as Nigel refers to, we've been working alongside Grant Thornton. It's a slightly strange situation to be in for our team, but that's absolutely fine. Yeah, my guess would be that they would be reporting to the March. My intention is that we will try to do that depending on where we get to and whether we've concluded, but certainly give a sense of our risk assessment side of things in March at least, with a further report in the summer on our sort of overall findings, as it were. But yeah, definitely there's certainly a significant degree of overlap, which is the first time I've experienced that in my career. So,
and just for clarity, that's because Grant Thornton have always done the value for money audit after the end of the financial year. The KPMG, who've now come on board, do it in year, as Chris alluded to earlier. So it's not because there's alarm bells, it's just because the two organisations have a different approach. And it's very much been helpful for us in terms of some of the long meetings that strategic directors have had to undertake. It's saved them a certain amount of time.
No, thanks for that reassurance, Nigel. I just wanted to say welcome on board, Chris, to you and your team. We look forward to maybe showing you some of the watering holes in the local area if we get an opportunity. But otherwise,
now we're talking. Now we're talking.
and I only have one last question, just from an audit committee point of view. I think our only hangout on our accounts is the pension valuation from Ernst & Young from the County Council. Is that your understanding? And I know we talk about opening and closing balances, and you can't give a fully qualified opinion. But is that the case? So we're not talking about lots of areas that we need to worry about. It's just the one isolated item.
That is certainly my understanding, and I have had a separate independent conversation with the partner from Grant Thornton, who told me much the same thing. So as far as I can discern, that is correct. Yeah. It's an interesting one around the delays on the pension fund. We do need to consider how we might react to that. Obviously, different firms take slightly different approaches on this. So I need to consider whether that would be something that would hold us up or not. I have experienced it in both forms, depending on various risk assessment factors and so on. So I can't say for now, but there's a possibility that we wouldn't necessarily need that assurance directly from the pension fund ourselves. But I can't confirm that at this point. But certainly, to answer your question directly, yes, I believe that it's just the assurance, the short letters of assurance, I believe they're called, from Ernst & Young regarding the pension fund audit.
Councillor Doris.
Well, not for minuting this, but it is a very serious question. Given that you're in Manchester, are you a City or a United man?
Just to eschew the normal jokes, I am actually a United fan. So there are some of us actually in Manchester, believe it or not. I'm actually a season ticket holder as well, so I've got the full credentials. But yeah, there are some of us up here.
I thought it was from Croydon. Yeah, Man United fans.
And just so the committee's aware, that was not put on the tender documentation.
Excellent. Should we move on?
Welcome.
Thank you very much for the welcome. I will see you in March if there are no further questions.
Thank you. Okay. If you want to sign off, please do, or you can.
Yes. Yeah. If you don't mind, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. I'll see you in March. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Right, we're going to move over to the item 6, unless there's any other questions from the committee. Statement of internal controls, the SICA report. Over to, it's either Phil or...
It would be myself, I believe, unless you want to do a preamble. I'm going to take the document as read as usual, but I am going to hop over some stuff and gently alight upon particular areas, provide additional context. I'm not going to talk through page 1 because that's quite a boring page, frankly. Page 2 alludes to the fact that there's been one audit in the period to date, which is health and safety, corporate, and HRA is to come. And then I will move on to talk about it. Once again, I'm going to take the document as read. This is on page 14 of the document in front of you. You will notice that this is an unusual report in a few different ways. So firstly, this audit was very much an audit that was undertaken in respect of concerns that have been indicated in the past by previous audits, issues and concerns. And while there are a number of recommendations in this report, it is important to note that there is a generally positive direction of travel in respect of the observations that were made in this report. Also worth highlighting that this audit was undertaken somewhat unusually in August/September, and for various reasons, some of which are down to individuals at this organisation and some of which are down to our own organisation. There has been a long delay between August/September, when the testing was undertaken, and now. And the reason I wanted to highlight this is because what we have here, in my opinion, and obviously the person to my right might think completely differently, what we have here is an unusual opportunity to see the observations of internal audits at a particular point in time, and then a set of management responses 3 or 4 months later, where you can actually see in a lot of detail the actions that have been taken, the observations that were made, and how actions that have been taken at a local level have progressed through to completion. So what you have here is not only a report of findings and observations, but management responses effectively which provide a detailed follow-up in respect of those important observations. Now, again, I don't intend to talk through those detailed observations or indeed the management responses, other than to say that the timelines that have been provided were reasonable and tight. In fact, I personally would have gone a little bit longer in respect of those responses than management have done. But nevertheless, he has highlighted which ones have been achieved and also noted, a lot of detail. Obviously, we will do follow-up ahead of the year end in respect of the responses that have been provided to ensure not only that management state that there have been actions, but effectively that the root cause has been addressed. But nevertheless, I believe that the degree of detail and passion that is evidenced by the management in relation to the observations, and as I'm sure he will allude to, the significant amount of time that he took to provide that level of detail, I would hope would provide you with some assurance that the recommendations have indeed been actioned. Generally, where management provide detailed response, detailed ownership, and a multi-layered set of implementation dates, we find that the actions have been addressed, whereas if management provide like a neutral, slightly waffly comment and copy and paste that down all of the recommendations, inevitably we find when we go back and check to see whether the issues have been addressed, they have not. It is also worth highlighting that a number of the responses here are quite honest and open in nature. So rather than just say this is going to be actioned, they're predicated upon a future event occurring, which again, I believe that you can take some reliance in respect of openness and transparency. Now, that isn't to say that all the actions will definitely be addressed, but I believe that you can take some level of comfort in respect of the nature of the responses that have been provided. Obviously, we will come back and report on this ahead of the year end, and in the event that some of those actions still remain open, as I anticipate some of them may well do, nevertheless, I believe that you can take some comfort that a large amount of action has been taken in respect of what is a complex and multi-layered issue that this organisation has faced for a long time. I would also highlight that this is an area that frequently gets limited assurance across I've got 11 councils that I provide audit services to. And so reasonable, again, represents a good level of assurance. And I will stop rather than talk about the individual recommendations in respect of that and ask if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions from the committee?
I'm I've got a couple of just, they're really little bitty things. In terms of the responsible officer and the job titles, and I think I know the answer, but just for my own benefit, HHSR, Head of Health and Safety and Resilience.
That's correct.
Because it does seem to vary. The acronyms change a little bit across some of the answers. So, because I think there's one where it says CHSR.
Yeah, so apologies for that. It should be Head of Corporate Health, Safety and Resilience. That should be consistent through the document, but we've had multiple people doing it, and it's obviously missed that ratification at the end.
Sorry, I can kind of just chip in a little bit on that. That's partly our fault because at the time we did the audit, CHSR was the common nomenclature that was used.
Right, okay. I mean, the other little thing as well is that in a later report, the responsible officer is actually named as an individual, but in this particular one, it's shown as the job title. Either is okay, as far as I'm concerned, but it would be nice to have a consistency.
Yeah, and again, apologies for that. That's to do with, I've only been here just over 4 or 5 weeks now, so it was putting it together, and now I've landed. It's changed slightly over time because again, there's been a slight structure change as well to ensure that it's more of an elevated post as a head of department.
And please do take my comments as just comments and observations, not criticisms in any way. Can I do one more?
Yeah, before I get on to mine.
If I were John Burney, I'd do another 15, but I don't write that down either. On page 22, about halfway down, the 3 Old Town Hall Theatre risk assessment. It's showing as December 2023. Do you know if they have now been completed, or is there a reason for it still being 23?
Yes, that should have been updated. So I believe they have been completed and now being consulted on with the lead officer there to look at if there's going to be a divergence from one risk assessment covering all 3 areas or 3 separate ones. So we just got a bit of divergence there that's been explored. So yes, the date should now be extended because they've completed the exercise of doing the risk assessments. Now we just got to agree, is that satisfactory? And because again, my early introduction to this, I'm trying to just get across to do that as well, to support that.
Sorry, just to add, so although the date that's been provided here is like slightly back in time, and because we've got a relatively new member of the team, so for the purposes of our follow-up database, I've added to the year end for implementation of these actions, because while the dates that you provided might well be the dates by which it would be done by, from our perspective, we need a cohort of evidence over a period of time to demonstrate the root cause has been addressed. And so from our perspective, we need an additional kind of 2 or 3 months to be able to satisfy that. Otherwise, we run the risk of the recommendation falling due and then it being outstanding. So from, just so as you know, on our database, we've registered that as the end of March.
Thank you.
Right, I've got a few, and Councillor Auditors, you'll be pleased to hear you've asked one of my questions.
Well,
there you go.
I have got another question, but I'll let you go first, Chairman, and I'll... Oh, no.
I wouldn't want to...
No,
I didn't realise I was interrupting you.
No, you weren't. I'd stopped.
Oh, you had?
And to allow you to start.
Okay.
And then when you stop, you can allow me to start.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
It's like one hearty.
It's Valentine's Day. We're all incredibly nice to each other. You know, this is...
We're being recorded. It's beyond me minuting.
Pension bracket.
First of all, I wanted to say congratulations on... I mean, I read the report and I realised this is a whopper of an audit. So...
And management should be congratulated on
the responses, you know, the work, and welcome on board. It's good to see you've joined the team and, you know, you're getting stuck in. So I can see that, you know, through the efforts of the internal audit team and your responses. So I wanted to congratulate you on that. It's always a very difficult area. area because it's dependent on people doing stuff out in the field and being trained and, you know, it becoming part of their day-to-day as opposed to being having to be reminded or told or prompted and whatnot. So, I mean, I did ask a few questions, but they were more around things like risk assessments, you know. It mentioned guidance not being provided, and the answer was that people are getting trained. And I just know, I've done risk assessments, you know, having the guidance document there and it's workable and it really helps. Just making sure that, you know, will that be provided? And I can say I've got a response on that. That is going to be provided because risk assessments are the key to, you know, preparing people for, you know, potential difficulties, you know, that may or may not occur. So it's good to know that that's in train.
If I may respond, if that's okay. Yes, so we did that response that we're looking to update the website, so there's a lot more information there, so they can be self-sufficient. But equally, we've done the manager self-audit, which identifies these risk assessments, and we've launched a new template, which is simplified, which gives a lot of prompts. So rather than have a separate guidance document, it's rather prompting them to do it. And I'm interested as a new starter to see how that lands. Yeah. And then if there are some FAQs, then I can create those. Do you see what I'm saying? It's about developing the individuals to be empowered to do it, and being able to do it rather than having to look for documents. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's about giving them the support and the tools to be able to deliver rather than having to look through check sheets how to do it. Do you see?
Yeah, no, making it easy for them. I mean, is there a new, sorry, I'm on a roll now. Is there a new IT system coming in?
There is. So we've got a commitment to look at October with the IT team. So they're creating a digital platform. So I've already spoke to Yvonne regarding how health and safety would like the workflows to be put in, and can it do this? And we've got a lot of potential there to look at that, which then will help migrate what we've got in other external systems into that. So hopefully it will not only be more robust and effective, it'll be an efficient use of resource.
That doesn't affect the information that's currently available on the web, on the intranet?
No, because it will actually connect with the better connectability. So again, we can use like SharePoint, we can use the web pages on the internet, etc., and then it can still go to the forms can be deposited there, notifications, calendar, and messages sent. Do you see?
So it's adding workflow.
Hopefully automation. So that's what I'm aspiring to hope to deliver. Is it will be able to be more automated, so people can be more self-sufficient, get the information they need, complete forms or go through processes, and then instead of an administrator sending information and collating information, we'll use IT to harness that for us.
It's good to see that things are going in that direction.
Yes.
Because when people are having to ask Mabel for a form and Mabel's not sure what the process is out in the field, but if it's automated, there's more automation, it just makes life easier for people. Councillor Douris.
Oh, okay.
You're back.
Yep. It was. I think it was actually to some extent related to what you've just said, but at the bottom of page 23, in the recommendations, you say verification of premises safety tours and workplaces are completed. How are they done? Are they done Are they done electronically, as you've sort of alluded to, or are they a paper and pencil?
It's kind of a bit of both. It is an electronic form that can be printed off and they upload later. Yeah. But at the moment, it doesn't directly go into a system. It's more of either a Word or a spreadsheet, which, depending on where they're doing it, they can either use a tablet or they can use it as a printout and then upload it. And
on that basis, are they stored then in the cloud or on the whatever the server is that the Quorum use? Yes. So the manager self-audit, they're coming central, so we collate those. So we've got them on our U drive, and I think we've also got them in Teams. So Teams is supported by the Microsoft Cloud, so that's independent to here, so more resilient. But yes, so yeah. So they are they're secured.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the council also has automatic backup on a 24-hour basis. So if anything ever does go, if it wasn't served on Teams in the cloud like it is done one version, then we'd have the previous day. So in terms of this, you wouldn't ever lose that much information because people are generally doing their risk assessments at different points in time.
And just on that, we are testing the resilience with the loss of IT infrastructure or a cyber attack. So to look at our preparedness for that as well.
Could I be cheeky and ask, could we have a little, for the committee, a 2-3 page report explaining within the health and safety area, this is what currently goes on. We are introducing a new automation system. I can't remember the name of it. I did write it down earlier. And this is what it's going to do to improve the situation.
Yeah, the digital platform is what we're colloquially calling it. So yeah, I'll get what Yvonne's reported and that'll give a synopsis of.
Don't go wild.
No, that's what I'm saying. But I'll be consistent with what's already been reported because that's already gone to a different committee.
Brilliant. Yes. Okay. I'm conscious it's probably gone to a scrutiny committee, but
Sure.
I think it will be education. Sorry, Councillor Reynolds. I forgot you. That's fine.
So just to finish on that, so it's software that they've got which can be configured. So we can configure it. You see what? So we're not buying a platform that's set up for us. We can actually have that user configure ability, so we can make it do what we want it to do.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I've just had a question around the health and safety consultant that's mentioned throughout the report.
Yes.
And doing a major review from May, and it's mentioned throughout the report. I was just wondering whether this is all the findings from that person's review, or whether there's going to be subsequent, because it says something about on here, it says that the results of their review is going to be presented to the senior leadership team on the 14th of December. And so is everything in
Yes, that was done.
in here, or is it going to be other
Yes,
stuff
so
that's going to come down the line?
this is mainly to do with the audit. So the audit did find a lot of the stuff similar, because in parallel, her name was Claire Saunders, she was doing that as well. So we have got a report on that which has been presented to SLT, and we've got out of that we've developed an action plan which I'm currently reviewing because there are quite a lot of actions. Some small, some more, like the digital platform, take a bit more time. So I'm just looking at reviewing those, so there will be an action plan coming out of that, because hers was more of a holistic, and then digging into some of the granular, especially to specific sites, as she had 7 outcomes to achieve. So she had that remit to do. She has formulated that report, which I've got. Okay.
So we might see that further down.
Yeah, I can do a briefing paper if required. Yeah.
Yeah, if we could have that as an action. Thank you. Then on the SICA report, before we move on, I only have one other question for Phil, which is the schedule at the end.
Shall I talk through the rest of the report? Because I was literally just talking about that update. If you want to skip the rest of my update, that's fine. But
no, I do not want to skip your.
All right. Well, it might be good. You might miss something. You won't. So we are now on Appendix B, which is page 31 of the document, and as you will note, there are just 4 reports that are final, and obviously we're kind of like late on in the year. And one of the questions you asked in your update is, do I have any concerns about completion of the plan? And the answer is no, because this was completed at a point in time. And I did drop an email through asking if we could delay this on behalf of my wife, given it was Valentine's night. And I didn't get a response, so I assumed the answer was no, which, perfectly happy about. But nevertheless, if we had delayed it by a couple of weeks, this would have moved on. And indeed, a number of these reports that were listed as draft have now gone out as final, and a number of those that are field work completed or ongoing have now gone through to being draft. So, and I know this because at least 2 of them I did myself. So that would leave 4 reports that are substantively to complete. One of those, I believe, is likely to be delayed a little bit, which is the HTIP one. Nevertheless, hopefully, we'll be able to at least start receiving some information pertaining to that. The others, I've got no particular concerns about completing ahead of the year end. And obviously, from the point of view of completing my head of internal audit opinion, technically I don't need to complete that by the end of March, but I would be in like a good place to be able to do that. So as an internal auditor, I am glad to be able to say I will be able to complete, slightly cheekily, my work plan in year and be able to provide you with a level of assurance at the year end.
Just one thing to add at this point in time, and upon the agenda for next month's audit committee, we will be bringing the 24-25 audit programme to this committee, which will likely include the HTIP review being in 24-25, as Phil's alluded to. So we will bring that, and that can be put on the agenda for next time.
So there's one that's gone over the line.
It's because of the nature of the HTIP programme, we wanted to make sure we got to a point in time that was useful to do the audit. HTIP is about to go into phase 2 and close down phase 1, which is the right time to do the audit.
I can see that.
And it seemed sensible and logical at the time, just for a small delay to give us something a bit more tangible.
Yeah, makes sense. Anybody else, any questions on the progress against the plan?
I just heard, I think I heard Philip say HTIP, but I can't work out which item that is, because I don't see HTIP anywhere.
It's in brackets.
It's on page 32.
32, it's over the page.
You said,
Yeah, sorry.
you were talking to page 31.
Sorry, I do apologise. Yeah, so
There's another 4 on the other
somewhat
page.
sneakily, if I stopped at page 31, we'd be pretty much done already. Page 32 is the devil in the detail. You know.
I did a Philip and skipped over that one.
And obviously the only other thing to mention is the recommendations. Again, I think we've got quite a lot of detail against that, and there will be a detailed follow-up process, as always, ahead of the year end. And in the event that there's anything that particularly concerns me, I will allude to that during the Head of Internal Audit opinion, which you will see in draft form before it goes final, which will give you a last opportunity to perhaps give a push on anything that remains outstanding.
Wait, can we let, sorry, I forgot your name.
Martin,
can we let Martin go?
We certainly can if you finish with the health and safety audit.
If you're finished,
if you're happy.
Yes.
so we can go off and
Yeah, no, I'll let his wife the tables book
give
today.
his wife a peck on the cheek.
Put your hand in your pocket, Martin.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of your Valentine's Day.
I'm sure I will.
So mine was really just a question to Phil that I'll nervously ask. I haven't asked it before the meeting usually. I think we've made really good progress in terms of the outstanding recommendations, and we're in a much better place than we were. There is still room for improvement. What's your opinion in terms of where we're at with outstanding recommendations at the moment?
So obviously it's an awkward time of the year. You have indeed made good progress in this. If I go back, for example, 12 months ago and then 12 months before that, the number of recommendations is substantially down, and particularly like if I look back in time, there were some recommendations that have been hanging around for years, frankly, and just pushed from one year to the next, and that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. So while there are a number of recommendations that remain overdue, outstanding, that's typically, I think, as a result of over-ambitious management, advocating for a date that they are unable to achieve in practice, often because of issues outside of their control. I would say that particularly with this organisation, throughout the course of the year, there's a slight build-up in terms of the recommendations, and then generally that number of recommendations gets whittled down at the year end as everyone kind of like concentrates their efforts in order to be able to reduce them, as it becomes apparent to them that they will be declared in the Head of Internal Audit opinion. And obviously that's not ideal. Ideally, you'd kind of like, keep it even throughout the course of the year. But if I were to benchmark this organisation against some of the other councils that I provide services to, I would definitely say that you would be very much on the lower end of recommendations. And I would say that's even more the case where I've had organisations passed across to me relatively recently, where the number of recommendations are frequently in the hundreds and sometimes in the high hundreds. So by way of context, I would say you are in no danger of having what I would consider to be a cottage industry in respect of follow-up. So it requires a firm hand and a good level of interaction between internal audit and local management, and a proactive approach to keep that number of recommendations down. But at the moment, I believe that is the case. And I would say that is the case despite the fact that within your audit programme you have a number of areas where you have looked at it knowing that there is a potential weakness there. So you have not shied me away from areas of known problems, and this would be a good example of an audit report where you have explicitly known that recommendations might come up. You have known that there is potential alternative forms of assurance in respect of this, and you have said, as an objective assurance provider, go ahead and look at it anyway. I've done that, I've got the recommendations. And I would also add, I am not of the view that we should write off recommendations without a firm grip on the evidence to support that the root cause has been addressed, because if there is a value to internal audit, it is in the recommendations, and if you wash that away like tears in the rain, then you will have lost the value of internal audit. And with that, I go to silence.
Any questions on the outstanding actions or?
No, but I think what Philip has said, and we've seen it in some fairly high profile situations around the country. And I can think of one in particular, a fairly damning comment about the audit committee and audit. And I think it's good to hear. I have to say, your opening remark that there were some very long outstanding audit recommendations. I personally don't recognise that, because I thought that, in fact, oddly enough, when I was last on this committee, I was saying to our internal auditors, are you being robust enough? Are you being, because we were getting good, and substantial and so on. And I actually wanted, it might sound perverse, I wanted some bad responses, if you like, where they were really forensically interrogating.
I can tell you what they were, if you like. I can tell you what the recommendations were, if you like. Mainly in relation to cyber.
What? Cyber?
Cyber, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, disaster recovery in cyber.
Which we've done additional audits on this year,
Yeah.
and got much better performance. You are right, we had a period of time where we were getting audit after audit that was, you know, in the old terms, full assurance or substantial assurance with very few findings, which is part of the reason, is what Phil's alluded to, I kind of went on the hunt for areas that wouldn't get a good performance, because we weren't really adding value. We still do a lot of the financial controls and the governance, they absolutely have to be done, and they're always a part of the audit programme. But it was more a case of where can we add value with internal audit in terms of improving how services are running, and some of the previous audits weren't. Also, let's not forget, we've gone through a significant period of turmoil in terms of COVID and in terms of the economic output, which put a lot of pressure on a lot of our services, a lot of staff. We've had more staff turnover, a change in terms of senior management as well, which meant we've had change in approach and change in direction. And when you implement those, you often have things that you can find that could be improved. Yeah. So it's been a combination of those things. And the 24-25 internal audit programme, which is already an initial draft, will again look to seek those out as well in terms of areas where we can add some value.
I hope that we won't be, the previous internal audit regime, if you like, won't be too damned by your comments.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, they are people I know and I've worked with in the past, as Nigel knows. So, so no, I don't believe that's the case at all. I think sometimes, for whatever reason, there comes what like sticky recommendations, and sometimes it's because of one organisation, sometimes it's because of another, sometimes it's just because the resources are genuinely not available to complete a recommendation which is considered necessary, but for whatever reason cannot be addressed. A shortage of resources, things have moved on, or a senior member of staff has moved on, or just doesn't want to engage for whatever reason. Now, I don't know what the case was in respect to those particular recommendations, but they hung around for a while. But no, your previous internal auditors, my equivalent across in that organisation, frankly, I approached her and asked her to work for us. So she declined to do so. But yeah, Yeah, I mean, you might think we're always at each other's throats. We're really not. I've been 30 years in internal audit, and a lot of people in other organisations I've either worked for or have worked for me in the past. My wife works for KPMG. You know, it's a small world in audit, yeah. And as has been made very clear earlier, there is a shortage of resources in internal audit. We've got no reason to be at each other's throats.
The one thing that you mentioned, that because I was chairman of audit when we got our first value for money with no notifications or whatever the term was, but we introduced a thing which it may still prevail, but I thought it was quite useful, that if ever we had a situation where the manager of the organisation, of the council, objected to a recommendation, then we would invite that manager in to the audit committee to explain why they objected to it. And we did do it once or twice. It actually had a salient response, I think, from some of the managers. But I think it was not a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I do look for.
Yeah.
And I don't see a lot of that.
No, I didn't see any negative responses.
I'd say two comments. I think, firstly, I'm not really asking you to respond to this, but I would say TIA are more inclined to give recommendations than our previous internal auditor was, and some of them kind of the lower level, and the kind of level 3 ones, where it adds a certain amount of value, is something where I think now looking back, maybe our previous internal auditor didn't add as much value with that.
2 or 3.
Yeah, no, I'm going back, probably 5 years now, 6 years to when I first started. That's one feedback we get. The second one is, you may find at the next audit committee that there are some recommendations put forward by TIA that management are not accepting of, and we could end up having an interesting debate around these tables, and in terms of they are not significant. They are not. If they were significant, there is something where I would step in and say, absolutely, we need these are things on the periphery of whether we think it adds value, and it'd be interesting as a committee, which is part of the reason why I'm bringing them. It'd be interesting for the committee to have those discussions with the service leads in the room, and it'd be interesting to see the direction we take on that. But they don't resolve any issues in terms of internal controls or significant issues. And I think me and Phil, we've not spoken about them directly, don't have an issue with that kind of discussion, because I think it might aid some improvements.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like if a manager disagrees with me in relation to a recommendation, you know, I'll come here and have a conversation with you and explain why I think as I think, and they have an opportunity to say why they think as they think. That's open and democratic dialogue, and an important part of the way that the process should work.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to round this off, I had in my questions and answers, page 34, 35. There's 2 outstanding actions in there to do with the Hemel Place Board, and they sounded like they were sort of ongoing programme budget setting, project management issues around the programme of work that's being set up.
So some of these Hemel Gallen community ones are going to be resolved very shortly. Maybe not quite prior to March, but definitely prior to the audit committee after that. So the memorandum of understanding has been revised and is going through the process. But between getting approval for 3 different local authorities in one period, it takes a certain amount of time. So that element of it, the elements that they refer to in terms of some of the projects which are not yet developed or in their infancy, as they are, they will be signed off by their board, and we will see that oversight as well. So you are going to see some movement on Hemel Place Board, is all I can say to the committee. I'd like to say it'd be by March, but I've learnt my lesson by saying it would be by February, so I'm going to hold back slightly on that one.
No, my only recommendation was that either we, update the date, because it's sort of in the past, or this be formally handed over to that area, and it's, the internal auditors are relieved of duty, because it's...
So, I mean, just in response to that, it's not down to us to provide a revised date, it's down to you as an organisation to provide a date that you believe is achievable, reasonable and appropriate, or to recognise the appropriate and corresponding risk within your organisation's risk register, formally accept the risk. What I would say is that I believe that this recommendation highlights something that is not hugely material to you as an organisation, but probably important to you as a committee to keep an eye on. I would say, as Nigel's alluded to keep a watching brief, and I'm sure you'll be updated in the course of time.
We will do that. So no action on that. I'll take Nigel at his word, and we'll see it being resolved. Then page 38. So the date didn't match the status update.
Yes, I mean, I don't know for certain, but I suspect that was intended to be 2024, and we will update accordingly.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, I just saw that was last year and wondered what was going on. Then, yeah, thank you for the list of old actions, or the outstanding actions. This might be my, naivety or whatever, but I just felt there was a problem in procurement. I'd like to sort of see, a little bit more information about what's going on in procurement, because there seems to be an improvement project going on in there.
So there is. So in terms of procurement, several reports have gone to Cabinet and to Council. There has been some issues in terms of procurement, particularly undertaken in the housing service, that was done outside of procurement and commissioning standing orders. They have now all been re-tendered or recommissioned to fall in line with where we want them to be and have suitable contract management outlooks. There is, at the moment, a review of the procurement commissioning standing orders and a review of the procurement service overall. That is being undertaken partly because there is going to be a government revision to procurement and commissioning standing orders from a government legislative perspective as part of their rollout of Brexit rules and regulations. That is expected to go through Parliament in the next few months. We've got some inklings of what that is. So our new PCSOs, as we call them, rather than going on about procurement commissioning standing orders, PCSOs will be updated to be in line with legislation, but also to take into consideration some feedback from senior officers and from operational services to make them more workable and manageable from that perspective. The controls that are currently in place are not going to be changed. I've met with the project lead yesterday to discuss some of those areas, but we're just trying to find something that's more operationally workable, but also within the revised legislation that will come out over the next few months. We're playing a bit of a guessing game at the moment. Once that does come out, those regulations, those PCSOs will come to this committee to review, and at that point that would be a good point where you can ask some questions in terms of procurement going forward. For an aide memoir, do you want to put that on the future agenda for about September time? And then if it slips, at least it's on the agenda and we won't forget that needs to come back here.
Great. Okay, so we can scrub my action. I wanted the drains up report. What's the status? What's going on? What's been delivered?
I could arrange for the cabinet report that we've done, our cabinet reports for the last few months to be circulated to the committee. That'll give you a good understanding.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah.
Because
it's an area I just didn't realise that obviously, somebody had lifted the covers on it. There was new legislation.
Yeah, a lot of the issues with the procurement in housing was during COVID, a lot of our contracts came up and we had to renew them because we had to do the works. And so we renewed a lot of contracts on a short-term basis, one-year contracts, didn't necessarily go through the normal procurement routes. What I would say, although that isn't acceptable, not something we want to do, at the time, pragmatism was we need to deliver the service. And today, I'm not aware of any of those contracts having gone through full procurement that haven't ended up being awarded to the person who's providing it, because a lot of them, there is only one provider. Particularly when it comes to the fire risk, the fire assessments, there's very little competition in the marketplace. So from that perspective, we've not found anything out that said what we did has lost us money or created any kind of fraud or any ill dealings in terms of that. It was just that we didn't do the full protocols that we should have undertaken at the time.
Right. Let's hope that sort of doesn't happen. Yeah, going forward.
It was an exceptional time.
I wasn't here, so I can't.
No, I meant well around the world. It was an exceptional time.
Of course. Yeah. Right. I think we're done on the SICA report, unless somebody's got any more questions. Shall we move on to the Treasury report? Treasury management strategy is back.
Great.
It's a shame Fiona's not here because this is her pride and joy.
I'll tell her you said that. So in front of the committee is the Treasury Management Strategy for 24-25. I felt it was prudent to bring this to the Audit Committee. I'm looking around the room and all 4 councillors sat through Finance and Resources last week where this was also open for scrutiny. So I'm assuming Councillor Burney's not here, so I'm assuming there's very few questions. And just for the committee's understanding, he asked me all those questions beforehand and I told him the answers and he then insisted still to leave the questions there for the benefit of the wider committee. So from that perspective, I hope you learned a lot through Councillor Burney's hard work on going through the whole report. And I do genuinely, I'm very happy that somebody went through the whole report and asked a number of questions because a huge amount of work goes into this. And all joking aside, the Treasury Management Strategy is the fundamental principles of how we invest £120 million a year and borrow circa £400 million a year. So it is a significant document. The prudential indicators in there are monitored by central government, monitored by ourselves, and if we do need to change them or break them, it is a significant decision that needs to be made. We haven't had to do that previously, and in terms of year on year, there is no significant change to our overall strategy or the indicators that are in the report. This is purely a statutory basis in terms of what we have to do. The one thing I would say, just to give this committee and probably wider this committee additional insight, is we have been working with our Treasury advisors in terms of trying to ensure our commitment in terms of environmental, social and governance approach. It ensures that we do invest in organisations that we feel meet our corporate objectives in terms of ESG, as it's commonly known. And so we are looking at some counterparties that we would prefer to invest with at the same returns as other investors based on their ESG rating, which Treasury advisors are providing to us. So that is now taken into consideration, but not at the loss of return, security or liquidity, which are obviously significant.
That will be of pertinent use to our climate change. Yeah.
Yes, and another chair of the Finance and Resources Committee would also be excited to hear that.
Your ESG is all right.
I knew you were going to say that.
No, it does. It's just, you go woke, you go broke. You know, businesses are meant to make money, pension funds.
And as I alluded to, some of the committee will be happy.
I've worked in the city for 40 odd years or so.
So, I mean, it would be interesting to know what Decorum do with that, because it's something that's come up at a local council at Tring and things like that. We're looking at things like that. And, credit ratings of some banks, it all looks good on one side, and then you look at the other side and think they haven't got any credit rating at all. And you're like, trying to find something is very hard.
So we have found one opportunity with Santander, which scores high on ESG. Speaking to our Treasury advisors, although they have got a table in which they score these things, they do make it very clear it's quite fluid, quite agile in terms of those organisations, and if anybody was to massively unpick every single bank and building society, you will find areas of investment that do not meet with your criteria. If you want to go 100% ESG and find some organisations that are purely based on kind of environmental, social and ethical and governance reasons, the impact on the return, you're talking many hundreds of thousands of pounds for an organisation like ourselves. And even then, there's no guarantees that some of the things that they're investing in isn't then being counter-invested. The Treasury advisors they are there to get returns predominantly for most of their investors. Return comes third in our list. Security and liquidity come 1 and 2. But even then, we have to unfortunately make every penny count for the taxpayer. But where we can, we are using ESG criteria as a means to ensure that we improve.
I've got a few questions, but Councillor Drury.
There you go.
Page 53. I just wanted. I saw this. First of all, I wanted to say this is an excellent report. I mean, it's the fact that the council spend good money and produce a report which basically says we're, monitoring our health, our heart, our financial health. robustly and reporting it openly is good to see.
Yeah, and yeah, I'd love to take lots of credit for the report. The report detail is Fiona and Lex maybe to a certain extent, but statute drives some of that. In terms of what we have to report, a lot of the information in here is literally a tick box exercise in terms of what we statutorily have to report.
So I've only got 3 questions, but the table 1 under 2.1,
yeah,
this might be in my ignorance, I just look at the table and then I see there's one line, capital receipts and reserves, and that's obviously got the biggest numbers in it. And I just wondered, I wanted to see a breakdown of receipts versus reserves.
Yeah, we can provide that. As you'll see that number is declining over time as we're using our capital receipts and reserves to invest. In terms of what that's made up of, that is capital receipts we've got from sales of assets historically, and the reserves position is Homes England grants that are being utilised, which we've got circa £9 million of Homes England grants either received or in the process. And the third aspect is one-for-one receipts that we get, which I think is included in the receipts and reserves line. And that is where we are statutory required in terms of right to buy if people want to purchase their council homes.
Okay, and it was just that when I see the word reserves, it just makes me nervous.
Yeah, it is not our revenue reserves or our cash reserves that we are funding. They're entirely separate to capital. So when you see the appendix in the budget with all our reserves, they're not funding capital. Capital is generally funded by any capital receipts that you have first, then it's funded by any grants, then you look at either borrowing or funding through revenue. But revenue, it's very unlikely that revenue ever works out as a cost-effective way to support a capital programme unless you were sitting on a lot of revenue, which we're not. Who are Kensington themselves, it might be slightly different stuff.
We'll never be Kensington. We'll never be that. And then on page 53, there appeared to be a switch from what again, it might be my ignorance, from internal borrowing to external borrowing. And should this worry us? So
in the short term, at the present time, we are looking at using internal borrowing, so borrowing from our own cash balances, because at present we earn about 3% on investing that. But if we go to the market at the moment to borrow, it's circa 6%. So it's more cost effective for us in the short term, and we make these decisions as and when we need to make them for us to use internal borrowing. There may come a time in the next 18 months, if interest rates fall, inflation falls in line with Bank of England, where some of our longer term investments, money market funds, are getting more than what it would cost to borrow from the government. If we got back down to borrowing rates from 2 years ago, which were like 1.75%. So we may go to external borrowing, but at the moment, internal borrowing is the right way to go, particularly as we've got cash balances of about £100 million. It's a sensible thing to do. We always have to make it from a liquidity perspective. We have a minimum of £5 million that I can get my hands on the drop of a hat. Don't ask me why it's 5 million, but that's the statute set out there. So that's effectively almost a quarter of our net cost of services that I could get access to at any point in time. But equally, although we can get access to it, we're also not allowed to keep any more than £5 million in any bank account at any one point in time. So there is a lot of juggling things up on a day-to-day, week-by-week, month-by-month basis in terms of cash flow. And those decisions about internal and external borrowing are part of that juggling.
I've got that answer. Yes, I'm happy with that. And then page 54, I noticed that the non-housing CFR has increased threefold. What is the reason for this?
So the large amount of capital investment in non-housing in the capital programme as part of the budget in the MTFS is for leisure and some of the commercial investments that we're making in terms of light industrial and approach to some of our fleet. So that non-housing, 3 aspects really: leisure, commercial and fleet. So fleet is about 16 million. I think leisure has 20 odd million in the medium term strategy. And then the other ones are quite kind of residual in terms of where they're at. As you know, the administration are going to be looking at both those aspects over the next 6 months. The fleet from a medium term green approach in terms of fleet and where we're going to go, and building a strategy on how we look to get cleaner and greener vehicles, and what the time period is of that. So that will probably drive some of the investment. And the leisure review will be taking place over the next 3 or 4 months in terms of leisure investment, where to invest, how much over the short and medium term. And those proposals will be going to members over the next 3 or 4 months for a decision in the summer.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to be busy.
And there is an impact, obviously, on revenue and returns in terms of investing those funds. So there are some big decisions to be made, because previously, when a lot of that investment was put in, particularly the leisure investment was put in 3 years ago, when we could borrow at 1 3/4%, like I was saying, now borrowing that money is, at the moment, it's about 5.8% from PWLB, so from government, which is the cheapest form of borrowing. So the cost of borrowing that has gone up threefold. So the cost of that investment is threefold. The return at present, I don't believe, will have gone up threefold. So yes, we will have to look at some of those investments and some of those returns and assess what's most affordable and the best approach.
That was it from me.
Okay, I've got a couple. Actually, going back to table 1 on page 51, it just occurred to me, because it's showing section 106, capital grants, and section 106. Is it appropriate in a way to put that in as a finance buy? Because a lot of the section 106 stuff is actually identified or semi-ring fenced for particular areas.
So that the section 106 money that is included in capital grants in section 106 is section 106 has been committed to specific capital projects. It's not all of the 106.
No.
It is just that's been committed to certain projects. So for instance, a lot of that line is capital grants, but some of it will be section 106 for affordable homes, which is several £1 million over the medium term.
I just wonder, on that basis, just for sort of clarity, whether it might be worthwhile in the future, in that table 1, if it's possible, separating out the capital, separating it out so it says capital grants and available one, section 106, and then identified or
yeah, I would prefer to put committed section 106 because that table's quite big, which is why we do add lines together. And I think if we start adding more lines, you will end up with a table that
you'll go over the next page.
Yes,
okay.
You know, it loses a bit of focus. Whereas I think, you know, section 106 in capital grants is sensible, but we can change that to committed section 106 just for clarity.
Okay, all right. And I've got one other. In fact, I might have got 2. Is that okay?
Yeah.
It actually, oh yes, on the appendix 3 on page 81, the counterparties, again, just catching my eye, there's a few there, the top one, the Al Ryan Bank, and then there's another one, the National Bank of Kuwait, and they're all showing as country. Are they protected by UK legislation?
As you're aware, that's why you've got UK going down the left-hand side. We only invest in banks who are based in the United Kingdom. So from that perspective, they are followed under UK legislation and the Financial Standards Authority. So we have the same securities that we would have with a bank of a name that sounds more British.
Okay. And given that there is a bit of space at the bottom of the, without going over the next page, have you thought of putting any money in a local building society, such as the Harpenden Building Society? Not that I have any input for them. I don't have shares in Harpenden Building Society.
So this list is our Treasury advisors approved lending list.
Right, okay.
In terms of our usual kind of AAA rating. So from that perspective, if they made that list, we would look to do that. We wouldn't specifically look to go for something that our Treasury advisors don't advise us to invest in.
Fair enough. And the final question from me, on the next page in Appendix 4, where you're talking about management roles and scheme of delegation, and you've got full council. Now, I stand to be absolutely corrected, but I don't recall full council receiving and reviewing reports on Treasury management activities.
So all the Treasury management reports that go, which are for a year to Cabinet in various guises, are recommended for approval by Council.
So they're inside those?
Yeah, they're part of the Cabinet referrals to Council.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Just proving that I did read to page 82.
You got further than me. You were down in the appendices.
Not it.
You got to read on page 82.
And by the way, Harpenden is an Indecore. So if there
Did I say it was?
I don't know what.
No, I didn't.
Harpenden Building
I
Society.
didn't say it was Indecorum, I just said it was Harpenden Building Society. In Harpenden, which is in St Albans.
That's true.
He's wider Hertfordshire County Council hat on there, I think.
Oh, that's what it is. Oh.
Well, you could say HSBC have no branches at all in Decorum.
Well, none of the banks have got any branches in
Next one's St Albans.
Yeah, true.
So,
Yeah, sad.
Unless there are any other questions on the Treasury strategy, say we noted, we picked up a few actions on that, not many. But, I did notice that we'd skipped over the actions. I do apologise, committee. I just want to flick back to them and make sure they're covered off.
There is one action outstanding for myself, which I think Fiona has put her name next to, which is to speak to the Finance and Resources Committee Chair. And I did start that conversation last week after scrutiny, and then we got interrupted. But I will pick that question up.
Okay. So the page 5 we're on, item 5, SICA report carriage rents. We've got a response on that. I can't remember who asked that question, whether it was Councillor Burney or you, Councillor Douris.
No, that would have been Councillor Burney.
So we'll see if he's happy with the breakdown of numbers there. Item 5, SICA report. We've got the list of actions, so that action's closed. We've just had an update from Nigel, and we've got. Did we receive those? The risks identified in relation to housing repairs. I think they're.
So I've circulated the email earlier on today, so members might not have seen it yet, but it did have that one on there.
That was the email from you. Right, okay, so that one's closed. We'll see if anybody comes up with any questions on it. Right, I've only got one AOB. Oh yeah, sorry, before I go on to that, we've got the forward plan at the end, which is obviously the next meeting in March, 20th of March. I just wanted to, the independent member, I know we discussed that, and Fiona was going to go back into HR and see. I just wanted a status update on that, maybe for the next meeting.
I think put it on the next meeting, it'd be useful. It may be that we can bring the spec to that meeting and then start to progress that.
Yeah, and just, I mean, if Fiona's got as far as putting out feelers to see if there's any warm bodies out there that might be interested, just to sort of find out.
Yeah, I've spoke to Hertfordshire finance directors as well, some of which have independent members, some of which have had them and no longer have them. The recruitment is the difficult part. That is the message coming back. Everybody's copying each other's job description, but it's the recruitment that's the key. Herts County Council have a very senior member of SIPFA who joined, who's a local resident. Because of the size and scale of them, that was attractive. We have got to find a way of attracting the right person.
Unfortunately, I can't find a friend. I've got that many accountancy friends.
They don't have to be an accountant from that perspective. You know, there's not many accountants that normally sit on audit committees, but they'd have to have relevant experience in terms of that chair and that scrutiny role, and assessing kind of financial information, and a desire to do so.
Yes.
Which is where you often end up with an accountant.
Okay, if we can have an update for the next meeting. Unless there's any other actions or points, I'll call the meeting to a close.